Okay, Claire Pope earned a BFA in Studio Art from Berry College, an MA in Art History from the University of Kentucky, and an MFA in the Studio Art from the School of Art Institute Chicago, where she received a Daniel Vandergift Scholarship. She has shown her work nationally and internationally, and in 2021, she was awarded the Artist Support Grant from the North Carolina Arts Council for environmental time-lapse film, The Meadow Project. She's currently Associate Art Professor and Visual Art Program Coordinator, and so much more, since we've heard, at Lenoir-Rhyne University, where she was recently honored with the University Faculty Scholar Award. Claire's work offers a unique blend of art and nature, being recognized both nationally and internationally. After earning a master's degree in art history, Claire worked for several years in galleries, but she remained drawn toward making and creating. In 2015, she followed that draw to the School of Art Institute in Chicago to pursue a Master's of Fine Arts. Claire says, I was in my 30s and had a baby, but I kept thinking I really wanted to be the person creating the work on the gallery walls. What set me on that path to return to graduate school to realize my artistic practice was finally combining my love for nature and art. Once I melded those two together, I found my passion. Claire's portfolio contains a wide range of media: painting, sculpture, photography, and video. She says about her work that it explores what I call the notion of ecstatic quietude and a wonder found in nature in the present age. It's a process of gaining understanding of who I am, who we are as humans, through connection to nature and expression through the arts. The Altar series, the exhibition that we have here tonight, began in 2020 as she began meditating on the relationship between humanity and the natural world in the context of COVID, the pandemic, and climate change. At the same time, she had been experimenting with natural materials in new ways. In late 24, her painting, Often I'm Permitted, from this series, was selected as one of the 49 out of 1,500 submissions to join the Coined in South exhibition at the Mint Museum, Uptown in Charlotte. And that opened soon, right? Oh, was it really? Oh, okay. So don't go see it. Look at it online. I would love to leave with you with one more quote from Claire that I hope resonates with you all. One of the things I discuss with my students as they're beginning their path is that you're not just an artist. You find your purpose within the arts. For Claire, that's been environmentalism and the projects that address the concerns of the world around us. We hope that for all of you, that you're finding a reason and a purpose, and you do it through your art, right? That they're not separate. Personally, I'd like to say thank you to both Claire and Joshua. They came in this weekend, and it was a pleasure to work with them. Really great conversations. They're professional in their approach to installing the show. And quite frankly, it was one of the easiest I've ever installed because I just sat down and drank espresso and watched them work. So I appreciate you. Claire worked all day today to critique students' works. The rumblings on the street is that you did a great job. Possibly too nice, but we'll talk about that later. Okay. So we thank you. The exhibition is beautiful. Let's welcome Claire.
All right, does this work? Everybody hear me? All right, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction, and thank you all for this opportunity for me to share my work with you. It's such an honor to share this series with you. We have been working on it, Altars, for 5 years now, and I say we because my husband, Joshua Siebold, who's here, has made many of my designs come to life through his bent frame building, so I'm so thankful to him for doing that. I'd like to begin today by telling you all a bit about my practice and then dive into what led to this exhibition. And my hope is that through this presentation, students will learn that unearthing your artistic vision is an ever-evolving and unfolding journey rooted in paying attention to guiding questions, moments, or even whispers along the way. So I thought I'd begin just by reading the first paragraph out of my statement for Altars. My work explores the notion of ecstatic quietude and the emotion of wonder as found in nature during the present Anthropocene age. Having grown up on a farm in the bluegrass region of Kentucky, my connection to the large, sweeping vistas of rolling green hills and vast domes of sky is ingrained in my being. However, my understanding of that land is also influenced by industrial progress and the violent stripping by mining and quarries. Thus, my artistic research is an internal exploration of the relationship between the majesty of the land and the stripping of it, the alteration of the earth by humans. My practice is a devotional undertaking, an investigation of the seeming duality of the present and where our place may be within that sublime context moving forward. And like I said, I grew up on a farm in Kentucky, a rural area, the bluegrass region. My mother was a horticulturist and my father a Montessori teacher, an antique dealer, and a poet. And I spent most of my childhood outside, and I felt a strong sense of wonder and awe on a daily basis when I was immersed in nature. And I would say that wonder was truly my state of being. And so that said, it wasn't something that I identified as an important emotion until I was an adult. And I think some of you all might be able to relate to that. I found that as an adult, wonder has become something that I have to seek out, that I'm conscious of, an emotion that I need to experience in order to feel connected to the whole. So I tell you this because wonder experienced in nature is central to my artistic practice, and I believe the emotion has the ability to inspire ecological conservation. So after attending Berry College for studio art with a focus in landscape painting, and then traveling quite a bit, I moved back to Kentucky and bought a farm with my now husband, and we lived there for 13 years. And during that time, there were 3 really pivotal moments, or whispers, if you will, that led to my clarity of purpose in my artistic practice. And the first was taking a course in Romanticism while earning my MA in art history at the University of Kentucky. So during that class, I was exposed to artists like J.M.W. Turner and Caspar David Friedrich. And from them, I learned how the use of light, color, and expression in a painting could capture the sublime in nature, and I was absolutely enthralled by that. And I began to get curious, and this is what I'm talking about along your journey when you began to ask questions. I began to be curious about how that approach could inform contemporary environmental art. So the second whisper also took place while pursuing my degree at UK. And during that time, I had an exhibition design internship at the Smithsonian Institution, which I hear you all visit. And I spent my days absolutely just wandering the National Gallery, noting how certain artworks moved me to tears and also sometimes to activism. And I witnessed then how affect through art can create effect. And that was pivotal for me. And that third pivotal moment, or whisper, happened during my time managing an art gallery and at the same time living on a small goat farm in rural Kentucky. I worked as assistant gallery director of the Cressman Center for Visual Art at the University of Louisville for 4 years, and balancing gallery work with my life on our goat farm deepened my awareness of the rhythms of the natural world and also the pulse of contemporary society. So I was kind of unsettled at this point by that paradox. How could one feel wonder and connection as part of nature while also being witness and participant to its destruction? So each day I lived the rituals of planting and harvesting central to my life, yet also saw the warming climate, the sprawling cities, cell towers bleaching the night sky, and factories encroaching on forests. And I felt compelled to explore this duality through art. So I began this exploration through materiality. I collected both natural and man-made matter, combining them in works that questioned our relationship to nature. Works were often inspired by the site-specific location where I found materials, as well as distinct moments of interconnectedness. Those moments of ecstatic quietude became reminders of mortality for me, morality, and existential purpose in an age centered on industrialism and consumerism. And from these materials I collected, I created paintings, sculptures, usually grounded in light and ephemerality. So building this portfolio led to my acceptance to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago as an MFA student in their interdisciplinary art program. And this is one of the pieces entitled Source. Let's see if I can, yeah. And it was produced around 2016 while I was in that program. It consists of moss that I harvested, guinea feathers from a local farm of a friend, ginkgo leaves, actually from the zoo parking lot that I had visited with my children, and they were horribly embarrassed because I was scooping up leaves. Pine needles, insect galls, a robin's egg, LED lighting that we had at the farm, old fencing from the farm, thistledown, and then metal sheeting and sticks. And I'll read to you all about Source a little bit. Source is a culmination of my interests in collecting natural matter during quiet time spent outside, as a means of exploring emotion and metaphysical connection during the present age. In this piece, I combined collected natural matter from our farm in Kentucky with found man-made objects to create a new mutated form, which raised questions about our current relationship to nature through that exploration of materiality. And really, as I collected and used these materials, they also began to hold memories for me. I don't know if any of you all collect anything in your lives, but that's the way I saw the matter. So my MFA at SAIC was transformative. The interdisciplinary program expanded my vision of what art was. The director, who was an AIDS art activist, Greg Bordowitz, taught us that art could change the world. He also exposed us to a diverse range of professors and visiting artists such as Theaster Gates, Molly Zuckerman-Hartong, Glenn Ligon, as well as curators like Helen Molesworth. And from them, I really learned the importance of a strong conceptual thread, the boundless possibilities of materiality, and to have confidence to embrace your own unique life experience as your strength. It was a low residency program, so I was continuing to collect materials both on our farm in Kentucky and in Chicago, and focusing mainly on creating sculptural works and these large-scale installations. Process-based experimentation became central to my work, and I still love to experiment at all times, as well as this consideration of light, ethereality, ephemerality, and also repetition through pattern. Seems to show up quite a bit. This is also an example of that. This was my senior thesis exhibition, and it kind of shows you the kind of installation work I was doing at that time. It was called the Vacation Installation, named after a poem by Wendell Berry called The Vacation. You can look it up, it's really good. The Vacation evolved from my developing interest in the process of collecting natural materials and the feelings of wonder I experienced during that process. There's a wall installation in the back, and that features found natural materials that were cast in resin, then placed in a spiraling mandala shape. Some of the materials I used were a dead bird that I found on our farm, magnolia leaves, acorns, and feathers. So the mandala shape was a hark to its divine symbolic meaning of holiness, meditation, and in Tibet, the center of all creation. And then on the light pedestal, we had 260 natural objects were collected and then cast in resin. The 260 is the number of days in the ancient Mayan calendar, and that fascinated me because the Mayan calendar was in line with the human gestational period. They are a collection, once again, of memories, and this was especially important because I was in a transition of moving from Kentucky to the job that I have now, and still collecting along with these feelings of ecstatic quietude. And this was also my first experience with documenting time through my artwork. The wall installation that you saw was my first attempt to bridge what I was learning about collecting natural matter with the two-dimensional form. So even though these were relief sculptures that I was working with, I was playing around with how to put these collected materials on the wall. And little did I know that would later translate to painting. So I moved to my position as professor of visual art at Lenoir-Rhyne University here in North Carolina with my family, and by that time we had 2 kiddos, 2 weeks after graduating from SAIC. And there was another whisper at that time. I was enjoying a return to painting through teaching the subject at LR, and I began exploring my curiosity of how my practice of collecting natural materials could be applied to painting. So that first summer after I began teaching, I accepted a residency at the Burren College of Art, which I highly suggest and recommend for all of you all. It's in the Burren in Ireland, and they have a wonderful ecological art program. But I completed a residency that summer, and that was my first experiment bridging my interest in collecting these natural materials with painting. And this is an example of those first creations. This one's called Rain Collaboration, so I'll read to you about that. Can an artist collaborate with nature on a project? Does the very word collaborate imply a willingness to contribute? Over the summer of 2018, while participating as artist in residence at the Burren College of Art in Ireland, I began a collaborative mixed media series with the rain. I painted an abstract watercolor based on the emotion of wonder that I felt while immersed in the region. While the painting was still wet, I set it out in the rain. After the work had dried, I painted lines derived from a linear patterns of a computer microchip that I happened to find randomly in a field in Ireland. And the result was a work which sought to call attention to the existential multiplicity of the present. That is, the need for both the holiness found in nature and the need to find our place within a culture of hard lines, structure, technology, and progress. And I later received a grant from the United Arts Council, so I was able to complete the series, and this work was actually one that I completed later at home with North Carolina Rain, and then exhibited a piece at the Mint Museum, and then a solo show at UNC Chapel Hill. So I continued to be very interested in this combination of collecting and creating on the two-dimensional platform. So then COVID quarantine hit, and that was in 2020, obviously, and I heard another whisper, or maybe it was more of a yell. I needed to release my angst from the current situation, and I also needed to find alternative ways to paint. So I don't know if any of you all would have been around then, but I was teaching painting too, and at the time, and had to get really inventive with how to teach the course online to students at home who had rushed home and didn't have any materials. So how were we going to do this? So I began to experiment with handmade pigments, and that's where Devotions to Dualisms, which is, this is an example of that series, began. So it arose from those needs and my continued interest in collecting. So here we have foraged pokeberries that, again, I was just kind of walking around my neighborhood into people's yards collecting these pokeberries. Then beet pigments from our garden, and all of that was placed on paper. So the statement goes like this: within these marks, there is a week of steady rain, the heat of the August sun dispersed with shadow by the poplar canopy above, the creek rising and spilling over on shallow roots as worms writhe through black soil between the maize. Chaos and order, yin and yang, material and spirit, order and adornment. As humans have done throughout the ages through the present Anthropocene, I begin with an approach of creating order, lining each foraged pokeberry up in a diagram of horizontal and vertical axes. It is a meditative, repetitive process, yet no two marks in this series are the same. In striving to create order, it is the chaos that resonates in the work. It is the cloud within the berry, the unpredictable elements that created the hue of the pigment, the thickness of the innards that spew across the page in random fashion with a mere touch of my finger. It is the chaos of natural matter that resonates. No mark can be predicted. No mark can be controlled. So creating that order really gave me a sense of safety, I think, in a time when so many people felt unsafe. And also, there was something about the palette after I created these works and had exhibited them. I started thinking about them, and there was something about the palette of these pieces that brought me all the way back to my classes on Romanticism. And with that whisper, I began to synthesize how I could bring all the knowledge I had acquired since that class together in a new series that would somehow inspire a discussion of ecological conservation. So altars began with experimentation based on whispers throughout my time as an artist and curious human being. First, I experimented with how to create a unique underpainting, and I finally settled on doing a rubbing of concrete to begin each painting. I wanted a touch of civilization in there. I then explored various modes of altering applied pigments. So when I say applied, oftentimes pigments or paints used in this series will be straight from the tube and not even mixed without any medium. So I applied pigments with found natural objects in my body, and I would get very physical. Add, remove, wipe, scratch, and throw natural matter onto the canvas. Oftentimes this was with rocks, sticks, mosses that I had collected. If you came to my studio, it's basically a cabinet of curiosities, so grabbing things and thinking about what I could work it into the paint and how I could manipulate the paint. And I did this as a means of expressing my emotional and metaphysical response to the current liminal space in which we live, while considering how we may transcend it. At that time, I was also returning to the palette of artists like Turner, Friedrich, and even Whistler. I was thinking about the Rothko that brought me to tears through immersion in color, as well as the Goldsworthy's impactful installation using natural materials. I was thinking about the change in the environment I had witnessed from childhood, that sense of wonder, to adulthood, and how that shift was moving at a more rapid pace than ever. So then I had a painting. One that made me feel, but I didn't feel that it was complete. So I went back to collecting natural materials and bringing them into the studio to make sculptural objects. And as I paired them with each painting, I had clarity. All of a sudden, through process, these works were personal. They were devotional offerings. They were a surrender for me. And they were altars. And by altars, I mean ALTARS. They were offerings. So I began to build on the tradition of sacred altars, to research that, and really looked at altars throughout human history in a variety of cultures, and still do. But next was the question of frames and supports. And this is where I started. So in order to pair the objects with the painting, I needed a frame structure, right? Something to set them on. But when I placed the painting in a frame, it didn't work. It created a boundary for the painting, and I didn't like it at all. I wanted the painting to expand and extend into the viewer's space and connect with the offerings of the sculpture. So I began to experiment and make designs, design, and finally came up with the design of a frame, and my husband brought that design to life. Thank you. From there, frames and supports were built as a sculptural extension of the painting, harking back to altarpieces of the Middle Ages, as well as shaped canvases within the tradition of modern art. I enjoy playing with the formality of the frame, the barrier, making it a barrier no more. With reflection, I realized that altars combined my experience as a sculptor, as a painter, and as an installation artist. So it began as this internal investigation of the modern conflict between the majesty of the environment and the stripping of it, that alteration of the earth by humans. So altars is thus a play on words, altars to altered states of the earth. Together, the painting, the sculptural offerings, and the frame combine to form new works, which I see as devout in purpose, yet also serve to raise questions. What is my relationship with nature? What is your relationship with nature? What is our relationship with nature during the present age of the Anthropocene? So moving forward, my plan is to take sabbatical next year, using that time to create a series entitled Ritual Ecologies that's going to build on this series in 3 significant new ways. Number 1, the concept of this new series will be different. Instead of exploring conflict and duality, I will be examining resolution and hope. 2, I will investigate how altars have been created throughout human history, specifically to engage humans metaphysically with their environment. And 3, my hope is to further push the boundaries of the creation of sculptural frames to new heights. So my artistic practice has been devoted to navigating the liminal space between ecological wonder and ecological loss, creating art that holds both awe and grief, both quietude and urgency. I look forward to deepening my exploration of how art might help us locate our place within the sublime context of the Anthropocene through the creation of altars and the embrace of hope. And of course, with many thanks to the whispers along the way. So thank you all very much.